Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into this episode of On the Beat, brought to you exclusively on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. This is a show where we bring you a different Bills beat reporter and we interview them every single week to talk about the topics swirling around our beloved Buffalo Bills. My name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. Please do me a favor. Please like, please subscribe, whatever platform you're consuming this vidcast on right now. Please do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment. If you're consuming this in post as well as a podcast, please like, please subscribe. Do us a favor. Tell a friend if you enjoy the content that Jerry, John, and myself are giving you. We would love to have that. Basically, that news gets spread. So tell a friend that you're enjoying it. But I am super excited for today's show as we welcome back a Bills beat reporter who has been with us several times from WHAM 13 out of Rochester, as well as 1/3, probably the best third of the Buffalo Plus podcast, Jenna Cottrell. Jenna, how are you today?
I'm good. I'll be sure to tell Mike and Dan your sentiment.
Well, we've had them on as well. You guys, I'll be honest with you, we love having all three of you on. Just the knowledge base and just the energy that you bring. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that you guys do a podcast as well. And obviously Matt and Ryan are good too. They have, they do podcasts, but you do a super, super good job. And it's weird because when I'm doing the bookings, because as you know, I book usually a month to a month and a half out. I got to make sure that it's not like Jenna, Mike, Dan, Jenna, Mike, like all right together. Like I got to figure out a way to like stick some other people in the middle.
I hear you. No, that's funny. We have fun with it. And that's one of the things that I really don't tell Mike and Dan, but I do love working with them. So I hear you, though.
Your secret is safe with me.
Everybody be cool.
It's also one of the most popular podcasts, vidcasts specifically on YouTube for Bills Mafia. So if any of you that are listening to this episode right now have not checked it out, please do yourself a favor and go check it out. It's one of my go-tos as well when I'm looking for information and news surrounding the Buffalo Bills. But speaking of that, there is news inside of not only the Buffalo Bills, but even around the AFC East. The New England Patriots announced today that Drake May is going to be the starting quarterback. Not going to touch too much on that. I think we kind of know what that franchise and organization, they actually might be the second team to fire their head coach in this division. And I'm not so sure that Mike McDaniel isn't necessarily on the hot seat either. And then there's all kinds of people in the media calling for Sean McDermott's head. So it's this is you know what? I'm actually going to start there. It wasn't necessarily in my notes, but the AFC East has quickly gone from presumably like Bills, Dolphins, Jets, all potential AFC East winners, all potential Super Bowl contenders, to probably being the worst division in football. Agree or disagree?
I mean, worst division in football. I mean, I think you could make the argument that we go into the season and it's like the Jets, look at them, all the weapons that they have, obviously Aaron Rodgers being healthy, and then the Dolphins with the weapons and Tyreek Hill and Mike McDaniel. You knew the Patriots were going to be a little sketchy in terms of like what they would be able to do. But yeah, life comes at you fast in the NFL. And this is another reminder of that. I always think of something that Mike says, though. It's either win or panic in this league. And I think you see a lot of fan bases, a lot of teams, a lot of, conjecture about the panic going on with even with the Bills, like these back-to-back losses, pretty uncharacteristic of the McDermott era. But yeah, it really highlights like there's 17 regular season, you know what I mean? Like there's only so many games. And because of that, the implications from every game are so meaningful. And because of that, we talk about it all week long leading up into the next week. So yeah, I mean, this division, things change so fast. It really is true. So yeah, it's just another reminder of that and how the NFL is wild.
Yeah, dropping the Ferris Bueller quote is perfect. Life comes at you fast. Speaking of which, the New York Jets, the New Jersey Jets, announced today that they did in fact fire their head coach, Robert Salah. What can you tell us necessarily about the situation? And I do have a follow-up question or two just in that regard. So yeah, what have you heard?
Yeah, I was just, looking at, I have a friend that works for the team there, and obviously we were actually supposed to do a Zoom today and for our Buffalo Plus stuff coming up later on this week. And she was like, yeah, I have to cancel just because, look, firings are nothing new in the
Right.
NFL, but to have this happen now, I think
Right.
everyone was so stunned by just the timing of everything. Obviously, the Jets coming home from London, a bad loss. The offense did not look good. They had a moment where you thought they could come back in that game. But this is just another thing of, Jeff Ulbrich taking over, the defensive coordinator, now named interim head coach. All the reporting that I've seen on him is that he's a players type of guy. He played for a decade in the NFL. He has a lot of respect of that team. I always worry about, as the team that's next up playing the Jets, is sometimes you get that bump of when
Right.
they're
Right.
new interim guy, belief in him, the morale is raised, what that can do against another team. But a pretty surprising and stunning type of thing because I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be this early. I think you
Mhm.
look back at some of the optics between him and Aaron Rodgers, that cutaway where Rodgers is like pushing him away and the body language of
Oh
that,
yeah. Yeah.
it kind of puts into perspective where maybe he was at, maybe this team was at, because obviously Rodgers knew about this. Like that was a piece of this as well. So it's pretty surprising. But also the NFL, like if it's again, it's win or panic. And for this team, they've had expectations. You think of the talent level that they've had and what they expected from this group. And last year you could say, okay, the injury that takes things kind of sideways. But yeah, I mean, obviously the organization felt like they were wasting what they had out on the field. So we'll see
Yep.
if this works out. I mean, what will they do? That's the biggest question. Who will they hire? What will that process look like? How long will that drag on for?
Yeah.
Um, will it be Bill Belichick? Obviously he's waiting in the wings. I don't expect that to be the case.
I hope it is.
I also yeah, I also didn't expect this to be happening now. So
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
I
stunning news today, honestly.
I feel like at 2-3, you said it, it's a little premature. And it's not like they lost to the Jaguars in London or they lost to some garbage team in London. I mean, they lost the Vikings, who were 4-0 coming in, are
Yeah.
playing at a high level and are now 5-0 after beating them. I think
Mhm.
what's interesting is you said that, and I don't know if you've got this kind of like just some insider information that Aaron Rodgers did know, because all the reports are that Aaron didn't know. He had no idea. Woody Johnson actually said that as well, that he talked to Aaron, but they didn't talk about this. I think what's weird to me is that it sounds like there was a contentious conversation between Woody Johnson and Salah today. That then, I mean, he got escorted. The reports are he got escorted out of the building by
Yeah,
security
by security.
and
I've seen
wasn't allowed to address the team, which tells me there was some concern there.
I've seen conflicting reports. Florio is reporting that he was escorted out with security. Now, I haven't seen a conclusive thing yet, but
Yeah.
even the fact that that's being floated out into the ether, that is pretty interesting. If that is true that he wasn't allowed to talk to the team, again, that's another note, but I cannot believe at face value that Aaron Rodgers was not at least
Agreed.
informed of this decision. That to me would be ridiculous. Like he is your franchise quarterback. He is a guy that has obviously a ton of experience in this league, and he is a guy that behind the scenes looks like has been pulling a lot of strings. So for them to say, "Oh no, Aaron wasn't involved," is completely ridiculous. I mean, that to me is just like, okay,
Yeah.
that cannot be the case. That might be what they're saying, but in my head, in terms of what actually went on, it would be kind of egregious to not tell your quarterback that this situation was unfolding. So that is my opinion on it.
I know I like it, and I can't say that I necessarily disagree. So we're not going to talk about the Jets for long. It's very reminiscent of Aaron Rodgers is part of the problem with the Jets. Not only his body language on the field, but his play. The offense isn't playing well. They come
Mhm.
back after a loss and they fire Salah. Very similar to the Bills having, was it 12 men in the huddle on a field goal attempt by the Denver Broncos last year, and they fire the offensive coordinator. It's like, oh, it's his fault. So life comes at you fast, Jenna.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know.
Uh,
Well,
I,
yeah.
Go ahead. No,
There's
go
a
ahead.
lot there with like did Salah want to fire Nathaniel Hackett, and that's
Right,
obviously Rogers' guy, and so
right.
it yeah. It the I love this sometimes because sometimes men will be like, "Oh, women are so dramatic," and I'm like, "Do you do you watch the NFL? Some of this stuff is unreal. It's like Bravo. It really is.
Right.
It's no different in my opinion."
You're not wrong. It would have been amazing had they made Nathaniel Hackett the interim head coach. But let's move on to another somewhat controversial subject. Last week we saw Joe Brady, offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, take blame for the loss for that whatever bizarre razzle dazzle play that effectively stopped all the momentum for the Buffalo Bills, who were trying to climb back into that game. And then this week he took a very different posture. This week it was like we were lockstep. I have no regrets. I'm not going to base the decision that we made on the result. You can't live life that way. Just wondering what your takeaways when you heard that in the Monday presser.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting considering the week before it was like, that's on me. Like, I got to put guys in a position to win and all this stuff. So my ears kind of did perk up where I was like, okay. That being said, there's no doubt that was a learning experience for the entire organization. You might say they've had plenty of learning experiences, which I understand why fans would feel that way. But for Joe Brady, look, I think that he still has the confidence of Josh Allen. I think he still has the confidence of Sean McDermott and Terry and Kim Pagula and all those things. But it's an embarrassing way to lose a game. And when you're being called out on SportsCenter and all these national media sites for essentially being like, that is egregious clock management. If you don't take a takeaway from that, then that is an even bigger issue. Look, Joe Brady, we talked about it the first, 3 weeks of the season. We're like, man, Joe Brady's going to be out of here and he's going to be on at head coach over here. Or what about there? And another life comes at you fast in the NFL. I think there's been some very humbling moments. Now it's up for this team to kind of figure out what that means.
Right.
And look, I get it. Like after the game, Sean McDermott was like, look, we want the ball in Josh Allen's hands. Like, yeah, because he is your best player. But then I think when you zoom out and you think about the clock management piece, you think about how the receivers failed him in that game, how Josh was off in that game, 9 for 30. There's so many things that play into it. That very unfortunate way to lose a game. Very bitter taste left in this Bills team mouth. But I do think that there is no panic in the organization. And I do think that's encouraging, because if it's panic, to me, sometimes that can be desperate. And I don't want to see a super desperate team. I think there's corrections that need to be made. And I think this team is capable of doing that. But at the same moment, there's a short leash in the NFL. And it is, what have you done for me lately? So the Bills need to clean things up and figure it out.
This is very reminiscent to me on some levels to the Bills-Browns game. I think it was in 2019. It was the year that I actually started my podcast, the Overreaction podcast. And back then it was just a post-game show and then a preview show twice a week, which was it was a lot for one person, but it was really no big deal. And it was the scene where all the Bills needed to do was run the football, just run the football. And Daboll was throwing the ball. And they lost that game because they didn't run it. They didn't run out the clock and effectively just impose their will. And in that presser, McDermott was very much like, oh, we're going to talk. We're going to solve this problem. Like when we get back, when we get home. And there's an aspect of, even in this situation, McDermott's comments, you saw what he said. We need a first down here after.
I was on the field, so I didn't see the cutaway. Yeah. And then afterwards was watching all like the video of everything. And I'm like, oh my God, he's saying like, all we need is a first down. I was like, that is very interesting. I will say something. So normally Sean McDermott after a game, obviously he comes to the press conference room. Normally it takes about half hour,
right?
40 minutes. It felt like a very, very long time in between.
Because
it was a long time. And I would imagine there were some very eloquently put conversations between him and Joe Brady in that moment, if I had to guess.
But what's weird to me is that McDermott then on Monday kind of doubled down with like, we're going to have some conversations about the way that whole thing went. And then you've got Brady out here talking about lockstep, which I guess, have you added that phrase to your vernacular yet? Like, we're in lockstep, like everything in Buffalo Plus, we're in lockstep with everything. So it just was very strange to me. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of this potentially, I don't want to say plays out, but coach gets involved when coach needs to, but he wants to let his guys coach, right?
That's the hard part, is I think that you trust your guys to do that. Like, you trust your guys in that moment. And in big moments when there's a failure, obviously everything gets redirected back to McDermott, but it's hard to know. It's funny because sometimes it's a double-edged sword. Like when people like, oh, we don't want the Bills to run the ball too much. Like Sean McDermott wants to impose that he wants the team to run the ball. But then at the other end of it, it's like, well, time management wise, why isn't Sean McDermott? So I think it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yep.
If I were McDermott, I would have trust in my guys, but it's tough because in those situations, that obviously you can win or lose the game depending upon what decisions are made. So I think it was a growing experience for sure. My take on we will have conversations, we're having conversations, and we are in lockstep. I think both things can be true. You can be like, yeah, we had the conversation and we're going to keep having the conversation. And also, okay, we are on the same page. We are moving forward. Like, I think you can be moving forward, but also address what happened and touch on that throughout the week. But your still general direction is, okay, we have turned the page.
So talk about Jenna Cottrell from WHAM 13 Rochester, Bills beat reporter. So I guess the follow-up, and we'll put this to bed after this one. So tomorrow, McDermott is he's doing a presser tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing you're going to be there, yes?
Yeah. Yep.
Is there a question that you're going to ask around this, or is there an expectation of questions being asked, or do you feel like this has been put to bed?
I think there is probably an expectation that something will be asked. I more so am curious about like now playing a team with a new head coach.
Oh yeah.
What goes into that? What does that look like? Now there will be new tendencies, new coaching style. Like, how does that play into? Because Monday night is huge. Look, I know both these teams, like obviously the Bills have lost the last two, but that's for the top spot in the AFC East. So it's like, this is a game with huge implications. But I expect there to be questions to be asked because I think a lot of people are still wondering, like, what the almost got me. What what happened? And I understand why fans want to know. Someone, I can't remember who, on the presser on Monday did ask kind of about the communication aspect between Josh and Joe and Sean McDermott and like what that looks like. But Sean would not really get into detail. He really kind of strayed away from what the actual like protocol is and flow of information is.
Yeah, I did a show yesterday on our network called The Aftermath, which is just an old school version of me by myself, versus having Jerry and John with me. Mm-hmm. And we're never going to get the answer because you've got Sean McDermott, right? And so is he a part of that decision? And then you've got Joe Brady, who you want Sean McDermott to release to make decisions, to lead his his offense. And then you've got Josh Allen on the field, who by and large, we have very much witnessed that Josh a lot of times is going to do what Josh wants to do, meaning that if there's an underneath 12-yard route, which there was, MVS was wide open over the middle, Josh decided to chuck it 40 yards downfield to Mac Hollins, like in that last series. So I don't know that we're ever going to find out necessarily what actually happened there, but it was definitely embarrassing, and it's brought some heat down on the organization, specifically Sean McDermott, which I'm not in the fire McDermott camp, but there's a lot of people who are, which is crazy. But
I get why fans get frustrated, but I think that's also a piece of the puzzle that maybe we don't talk about enough is like Josh has earned the right to be the decision maker or a piece of the decision making. And sometimes in moments like that, I think sometimes Josh thinks that he has to do it all immediately. Like he has to be the one. And sometimes it's like, maybe the check underneath would have been more serving in this situation. But I really do believe that this is something that the team can learn from. And they're going to have to because the NFL schedule presses on.
Do you feel like it brought up a question in my head? Do you feel like Josh misses or needs to have that strong voice to jerk the chain once in a while that he had in Brian Daboll? It seems like when Brian Daboll was here, I don't want to say that he was more, the word is not reserved. The word is not leashed. The word is not, it seemed like he was more in tune with what the offense was supposed to be doing versus Dorsey. This is your team now, and McDermott saying that as well. This is this is Josh's team. Mm-hmm. And Brady lives in that same space. We live and die by the arm of Josh Allen. Josh Allen is an ultimate talent. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like he needs to have that person that's there, not to literally slap him upside the head? Get like, what are you doing? Like, take the easy thing. Do you feel from what you've seen over the years that he needs it?
I think the dynamic was so different. Like when Daboll was his coordinator, Josh was coming up. You know what I mean? Like he was trying to prove himself. He was trying to, I don't want to say like like he was trying to like fine tune himself
Yeah.
because he had all the crazy plays and all this stuff. And I think he really trusted in Dable to be like, get your stuff together. Like we will figure this out. Like, he kind of had that voice, but now as Josh has become and ascended to the star that he is, I think it would have to be the right person. I think him and Joe Brady ideologically get along way better than him and Dorsey ever did.
Yeah.
Like, I think him and Joe get along very, very well and are very much on the same page. And I think like that is a huge benefit to Brady. And I think you see that level of trust and all those things. But I think sometimes Josh needs to be reminded that he doesn't have to do everything himself. And I think based on the power structure, excuse me, of what it was earlier on in his career, maybe it sunk a little bit further in when he was younger because he was still trying to evolve. Whereas now he is who he is, and he is incredibly, amazing at what he does, that sometimes I think maybe that voice doesn't get through as much. They're probably saying the same stuff if I would have to, different schemes, different stuff, but being like, Josh, settle down. Like you don't have to do it. But sometimes it just sounds different from different people depending on what that dynamic is.
Yeah, for sure. Having a great conversation and get some really good insight from Jenna Cottrell, Bills beat reporter. Let's move to injuries. Just wondering if you've got any current injury status on Taron Johnson, Khalil Shakir, and possibly Taylor Rapp.
Yeah, so Taylor Rapp is still in concussion protocol. Sean McDermott said that on Monday. In terms of Khalil Shakir, McDermott said that he is working closer, kind of a day-by-day type of situation. I believe the word he referred to was they're in limbo, which I was like, okay, very interesting. Something to note, Khalil Shakir and Ed Oliver did not make the trip to Houston.
Oh, I forgot. I should have asked about Ed too. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I have not heard anything on Ed, but Ed was not in Houston. Neither was Khalil Shakir. I was kind of surprised by that, just considering if you were injured, but like close to coming back, a lot of times you will make the trip. Taron Johnson, he was there. My impression was going into this week that Terrell Bernard would play this week and Taron Johnson would not. And that's how it turned out to be this week, of this past Sunday. My expectation was, Taron was a limited participant in practice last week. I would expect him to be elevated to like a full participant in practice. My expectation there from that would be that he would play on Monday night. That's kind of the progression that I am seeing. We'll be in Orchard Park on Wednesday to see if that actually is the case and he is no longer limited in practice. But that was overall kind of my general sense, is that Bernard would be back before Taron Johnson. But Bernard looked really good. And if you could get Taron Johnson back on the field, that would be massive for a team that has had some injuries for sure. And I was very concerned about this Bills offense without Khalil Shakir. Like, I don't think we realized how much, I think Khalil Shakir is damn good at what he does.
Oh, yeah.
He's not the fastest. He's not the tallest. He is not the most athletic, but he is dependable beyond belief, setting a new NFL record for consecutive catches. Like that dude has been a safety blanket for Josh. He's been able to catch the ball in really tough moments. And I think you saw what this offense is lacking without Khalil Shakir. And so for him to get back out there, you hope that he's healthy or getting close to that. But he is such a huge piece of this Bills offense that really I was not expecting to think of that much heading into the season.
Yeah, it seems like just from what we've heard from Dr. Brad Bowen, who gives us information as far as just from a injury standpoint, and Dr. Kyle Trimble, that the high ankle sprain is generally at minimum a 2-week injury. So there's an expectation that I have that we're not going to see Khalil this week either. Who knows? Taron Johnson, you got to see him practice last week. He was obviously in a red non-contact jersey, but he was catching footballs. He was motoring around. Somebody said they felt like he was still favoring his arm. Did you feel like he was favoring his arm last week?
I kind of felt like, so he had like a club, like a not cast, but like wrapping around his arm. I just felt like he was kind of like he would have some catches and then kind of go like this. You know what I mean? I feel like maybe he was working through just like
the
playing.
mental aspect.
And that is also a big piece of a player coming back from an injury. That's really interesting about the Khalil Shakir thing.
Yeah. So it's just you never know. It's just what doctors, orthopedic physical therapy doctors effectively feel. It's like, well, it's a 2 to 4 week injury generally at minimum too. So we'll see. Moving to Josh Allen. If you could give some insight just to the listeners, I feel like I knew a level of the process, the procedures as it pertained to concussion protocol when somebody takes a good shot on the head, which was basically player takes a shot. If he's obviously unconscious on the field and they have to take him off, what's going to happen. Like he's leaving the field. If he walks off under his own power, they either take him immediately, they take his helmet away, or somebody calls down and says, you need to go through the process. But there's a baseline test that they have to pass, which we apparently assume Josh Allen passed that test despite him looking, and you were on the field looking incredibly unconscious for at least a second or two. What can you tell us as far as the status now that he's not in concussion protocol? Follow-ups? Are there no follow-ups type of a thing?
Yeah. So Josh is not in concussion protocol because he cleared the concussion test in the blue tent on the sidelines. So what happened was obviously the play was going down. So Josh obviously kind of like collapsed a little bit. I thought he got the wind knocked out of him. Like that was kind of my impression. As someone who's had that happen before, you kind of just like slump over. And then he was kind of like touching his chest walking off the field. So I was like, okay, maybe it's a chest. Again, I'm on the field, so I don't see the broadcast. I don't hear the sideline, what's going on. Like I'm just hearing the reaction from the crowd. So then they put up the blue tent. Josh goes into the blue tent. The red, believe they wear a red hat. That's like the independent neurologist from the NFL, because someone up in the booth says, hey, they need to do a consultation to do a test. So Josh is in there. I don't know exactly what the injury is at this point, because I'm like, okay, was it chest? Was it a head? Whatever.
Right.
So Josh goes in there, he tries to leave, and then they pull him back, and they're like, no, you need to come back in. I just think it's equates to Josh Allen being Josh Allen, and he wanted to know what was going on in the game, because obviously you can't hear, you hear like the crowd cheering because, the Dwan Smoot knocked things away, Dorian Williams, all that stuff. But Josh was cleared by an independent NFL neurologist to go back into the game.
Yep.
When you are cleared, you are cleared.
Yep.
That is how it works. So Josh goes back into the game. I know there are people saying that Josh was doing smelling salts before he went into the game. Smelling salts are very commonly used by NFL players all of the time. I saw Josh do it. Okay. That to me wasn't a big deal, because you see it in hockey. You see it in a lot of sports. Like
everywhere.
Smelling salts are not, I can't believe, like I had a friend be like, I can't believe they had smelling salts. I was like, that is super common.
Pretty common. Yeah.
It really is. And people were like very shocked by that. But because Josh was cleared, he re-entered the game. And because he was cleared, they don't have to hold him out. Like he cleared concussion protocol. So that's a completely different thing.
And I think so he's clear. There's no more further testing. And I think just so they can hear it from you, there's a lot of people, a lot of Bills Mafia even, who were upset that he went back into the game. At that point, it's out of the Bills' hands. The Bills don't pull him off the field. The Bills don't look for another consult. Once he's cleared,
he's cleared. Yeah.
Process. So this wasn't the Bills forcing him back into the game, even though they knew that he may have been.
No, that was not it at all. He was cleared again by someone that's independent from the team. And when you're cleared, Josh was running out on the field with his helmet. Like it wasn't that they were like, because you have to operate under, these are professionals doing their job. Right. And they don't have skin in the game. So if they think there's a serious issue, that is absolutely what will be done. They will take him out. But because that they realize that he passed the test, okay, you're good to go back in. And if I'm the Bills, you operate under the fact that these are working professionals and they know what they're doing. So right. I would have done the exact same thing, and I would have said, Josh,
go play.
By all means, that's you.
I live under the rule, or I live not the rule. In this instance, I live under the assumption, or at least the belief at this point, that he hit his head really hard. He bounced about 1.5 feet off the turf, headwise, bang, and up again. I believe he was unconscious. I believe he passed the test, and I'm at this point just under the belief that he really is Superman. That's just that's just who he is. Like, would you expect anything less from that guy?
The replay looks very bad, so I understand. And fans are concerned. I totally get it. This is a violent game.
Violent.
And I think that, there are many reminders throughout a game, throughout a season that is the case. But the Bills are following protocol. That's as much as I can say about it.
Got one more question for you, Jenna. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we always love having you and your partners on our network and on this show. Before we get to the last question for you, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, all your socials, all that kind of stuff, where they can find your work?
Yeah. So if you check us out on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel, like we've talked about, it's Mike Catalana, myself, and Dan Fates. We have a lot of fun. We go to the games, we do previews, we do post-game reaction, what they're saying in the locker room. We do a segment that I really love called What They're Saying. And it's what they're saying in the rival city where the Bills are playing that week. So it's fun to get kind of an inside look at what another team's current situation is like heading into a matchup with Buffalo. And then, so that's Buffalo Plus. And then you can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at my name, at Jenna Cottrell. Very creative, but yeah, so plenty of work. And if you live in the Rochester area, I work at Channel 13, the ABC station. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then last question for you. The Buffalo Bills offense has not looked like the Buffalo Bills offense, at least from the first 3 weeks, but even in general, they've just had a couple not great weeks. What is your biggest thing that they need to do this week to get back on track?
I think for me, sorry, my fiance was,
no worries.
I think for me, the biggest thing is it's hard on the road, definitely. But pre-snap motion has just been so massive to getting this team to where they want to go. And I think you have to figure out a way to be able to utilize that in loud environments, because what that does, because you saw how the lack of separation just really hamstringed this team on Sunday. Like, you don't have the typical number one guy. So you got to give your players the opportunity to make the most of what they have. And if separation is an issue, having pre-snap motion is a huge piece of being able to scheme things open for guys or give them the availability to do that. So that is something that I want to see from this Bills offense. And then, I want to see Josh play like Josh. Like, I feel like it's just been, he's kind of been forcing it a little bit, and just some of the decision-making, taking the cheese. And then honestly, I'm going to have the receivers catch some balls. What are we doing? Like, I should say pass catchers.
Yeah. Do your job. Do your job. Right?
Your job.
Yeah.
Curtis Samuel has been, and this is a little bit of heat on Bean, because look at the guys that they brought in this season. Curtis Samuel has done essentially nothing. MVS has done essentially nothing. You bring in Mac Hollins, who's a great option for a fourth or fifth wide receiver special teams player, but he should not be out there.
17. He's 6 receptions on 17 targets.
Yeah, like there's a ceiling. We know that. Yeah. So, like, I mean, Dawson Knox has not been involved really in the passing game. Dalton Kincaid so far this season has not played up to the expectations that we all thought and thought we think he can ascend to.
Correct.
So it's just, sorry, I was going to make a joke like men being disappointing, but like, I'm kidding. But I think there's so much opportunity for this team still. But you got to figure out a way to get guys involved, and guys need to, this is also not on coaching. You also need to be able to make a play. Yeah, and that is something that the Bills have struggled to do.
That is Jenna Cottrell, and Jenna Cottrell knows what she's talking about, ladies and gentlemen. It was a little
spicy, sorry. But
no, it was great. It was fantastic. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to have you back on the program. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been tuned into On the Beat on the Overreaction Sports Network, powered by Believe. My name is Joe Miller. For John, for Jerry, for me, for Jenna. Appreciate you guys. Love you. We'll talk to you soon. Go Bills.